we have come to visit you in peace and with goodwill.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 80. I'm Aaron Pollyea.
And I'm Darlene.
Well, and today we decided that we were going to do When Worlds Collide based on last week's that had like a planet approaching Earth. Both last week's movie, The Man from Planet X, and this week's movie, When Worlds Collide, were done in 1951. And it's night and day, isn't it?
Well, one's colored and one's not.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the quality.
Yes, it is very, one's by George Pal.
Well, I mean, and George Pal clearly cares.
Except for the last...
There are problems in this movie. Okay, because, look, let's be honest. Every movie that George Pal did in the 1950s and 60s, we either have enjoyed or will enjoy. That's not to say that there aren't problems in each one. I absolutely love Time Machine and War of the Worlds, but I still found fault in them. There is fault in some of them, but they're very few. And what works in these movies, in George Pal movies, really work well. So, Darlene, you said that you'd never seen this movie before.
I don't remember it, no.
Which is shocking to me because this is, of course, one of my top 5.
That you've had this DVD for a while.
I've had this DVD for a while. I used to watch it all the time. It, and along with War of the Worlds, are two of the movies that I remember watching and actually being upset about and crying about as a kid. Just the awful things that are happening in them, but people rising up above them to be good people. I remember having strong emotions about.
You also have people rising up in this movie to be bad people too.
Yes, but it's the fact that the vast majority of the people that are the characters in this are doing good because they can, and they want to, because they want to have the world to be better. Yeah, the world is falling apart around them. But it's no, I'm going to make this sacrifice that hurts me because it's going to help everyone more. And that's a big... It's the same kind of thing that we see in War of the Worlds. And we'll talk about it when we get into the plot of this. But in War of the Worlds, you have that. You have these people that are really just trying their best to do good. Or people that are trying to do good on the small scale, like the 3 people that are out by the landed Martian saucer that are honest to God just going out to it to talk. Hey, they're guests. We should welcome them to our world. Let's try to communicate. And they walk out there and they're honestly not being aggressive. They're just wanting to say hello, and they get vaporized. It's that small. They're trying to do something good and nice.
You mean the
3 guys that were watching the saucer right at the beginning? It's that it's this.
No, you're not talking about this one.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about George Pal in general. Has these themes in his movies.
This wasn't this movie.
No.
Okay,
we're gonna go into the movie now.
The movie starts with Genesis.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of George Pal movies have a biblical reference in them, along with it's Woody Woodpecker. Woody Woodpecker's in all of these films.
Where was it in this one?
Oh God! Now I don't remember. It's in all of his films because he knew the people that worked with the Woody Woodpecker stuff. That's why in Destination Moon there's that whole Woody Woodpecker sequence that was specifically done for Destination Moon. I know that I remember in Time Machine there's a little girl that's carrying a Woody Woodpecker doll that drops it in the quote unquote future London as the bombs are coming in. I remember that's in there. In War of the Worlds, it's specifically a Woody Woodpecker laugh that you can hear in the background of one scene. But it's
supposed to be the TV or something?
It's supposed to be the radio or the TV or something going. But it's a very clear Woody Woodpecker laugh. And I honestly, I can't remember it in this film. But I know it's there because it's in every single George Pal movie. So yeah, we start with a biblical quote. and them talking about like astronomy and how it's looking out into space and how space is so vast and that it takes a lot of effort to find anything. And then they go to this South African observatory. And I thought that's an interesting choice, at least for today. I don't think they would do that today because it's clearly apartheid South Africa, because it's all the scientists there are white. And
Well, at that time, yes, it would
yeah,
have been.
it would have been.
But it was supposed to be the highest. They said the highest observatory at
At the
and
time.
I'm like going.
Well, see, in 1951, I don't know.
There was still the one in Hawaii, wasn't there?
Yeah, but I without doing further research on it, I actually don't know if that's true or not. But it doesn't really matter because it's a very minor plot point in this movie. The point, what they're trying to say is that at the South African telescope, these astronomers have found, they've detected what they originally quote as a star.
Dr. Emerson Bronson.
You put way too much importance on them just calling it a star. Okay? Because you're like, it's not a star. And I'm like, I agree, it's not a star. It's that they called it a star because it looked that way at first.
I told you I was confused.
Okay.
Because at one point they're calling it a star, and the other one thing a planet that was going around the star.
Now you're gonna have to remind me about the names of the planets here.
It's
even though I've seen this movie a billion times, it's like I always want to say it's Zoya, but it's not. It's Zyra and Bellis. Bellis is the big one, right?
It's supposed to be like 12 times.
They say
it's a terrestrial one.
Okay,
too.
They say it's 12 times the size of Earth. Now, that's not very precise because there's a difference between being 12 times as big or 12 times as massive. Because if it's 12 times as massive, it could be like 2 times the volume of Earth. It all depends on the density. I know we're getting into the details here.
I think they left that vague for a reason.
We see it later on, and we can say that Bellis is bigger than Earth. It is much larger, but it's
picture. It looks probably twice the size.
Yeah, about twice the diameter. So okay, fair enough. It's probably about the same overall density, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that Bellis is a big world, and that it has effectively a moon that is the size of Earth, about the size of Earth. And that's Zyra. Okay.
Yes. So the calendars all have Zyra and
Bellis. Like but we're getting ahead of ourselves on this. Okay. So these South African astronomers have found this, and it's moved 1 million miles in 2 weeks. And this is where I go, ooh, math. 1 million miles in 2 weeks actually isn't that big of a deal.
1 million miles in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. 1 million miles in 2 weeks. And it's 3 billion miles away. So I'm like, okay, so there's like 10 years-ish before it'll hit. No, it's not exactly right. They say what, like 8 months later on in the movie.
Less than a year.
By the way, folks, some of the numbers in this movie are where I actually say it doesn't work, because it's like the one time that you can try to do proper math in this movie. And George Pal tends to be okay with it in other movies, though he tends to avoid doing any math. But in this case, it's very clear what the math is, and it's a little wonky. Anyway, there is a guy that's at this observatory, and his name is David Randall. He is a pilot, and he's actually introduced to us as flying in on a plane. He's a pilot, and he has this kind of blonde bombshell on his arm in the plane
in his seat,
and they're making out while he's landing. And I thought, wow, this guy's kind of a player, and it turns out he's not. It's just that this woman was like really into him.
I don't know. It just didn't. It was not good for the movie. That could have been left out.
What I think it actually adds to his character, though, a little bit later on. And I'll explain it when we get to this point. He is basically a courier. He's an aircraft courier. He takes important messages from A to B and takes his job very seriously. They handcuff a box to him to take the data from this telescope back to America, and I guess it's like New York, and they're going to take it to a different astronomer, right?
To Dr. Cole
He gets an offer.
Henderson.
He gets an offer while he's in the air. There's like an air telegram or something like that they call it, or a radiogram. They call it a radiogram, where it's clear that like the news agencies know that there is something in his possession that is worth a lot. That's why he's acting as a courier, and they're offering him like $5,000, which in 1951, if you convert it to 2021 dollars, that's around like $53,000 that they're offering him just to look inside this case. And he kind of shakes his head and just crumples up the paper and throws it away. Like, it's clear that he takes his job very seriously.
You have to, in that kind of business, your reputation is what, you can't get that kind of a job without a reputation. And if you one time screwed up,
yeah, you're done. And here's the thing. He does not know what is in the case. He actually doesn't care what is in the case because of his job.
$5,000.
He just wants his payment of, I forget exactly how much it was.
I thought it was $5,000.
That was what the radiogram said, was an offer of $5,000. I thought it was like a $15,000 payment or something like that. It was a huge amount. But it's clear that this guy is good at his job and is professional and doesn't screw up, right? Well, he lands in New York, and he's pointed out by our leading lady. The character's name is... Are you
sure that was New York? Or
it could be. It doesn't matter.
I thought it was in California.
Does not matter. He gets to the new world. To me, if he's flying from South Africa, he's landing in New York first, or Miami. It doesn't matter, right? This is our leading lady. The character's name is Joyce Hendren. The actress's name is actually Barbara Rush. And here's where I'm going to pause on the plot for a second, because our main actors here are Richard Dare as David Randall, the courier, Barbara Rush as Joyce Hendren. We have John Hoyt as Sidney Stanton. There are tons and tons and tons of people here that have links to Star Trek, the original series. Either they acted in it as specific characters, like admirals or things like that, or in Barbara Rush's case, she was married to Jeffrey Hunter, who was actually the original Captain Pike.
And there's your bombshell.
Oh, it was Gertrude Astor. Oh, I'm gonna have to look up Gertrude Astor here really quick. The blonde bombshell that was in the aircraft. Oh, that was not her, Darlene.
That wasn't her? It says Traveler.
Yeah, but she was like, she would have been 68 in this movie. So like, no, that you pointed out the wrong person. Anyway, I don't think it matters. It doesn't matter. Anyway, we're moving on. I just wanted to say that there's lots of weird Star Trek connections in this, which is cool. So if you're a big fan of the original series, watch, please. Anyway, Joyce, the character is Joyce, points out that that's Randall, and she takes him to see her father. Now, her father is Dr. Cole Hendren, who's played by Larry Keating. Larry Keating's an actor that we have seen many, many times in these good quality movies. He was in Mr. Ed. He was in tons and tons and tons of old school movies and TV shows. Regardless. She's taking him to see her father. And she starts talking about how it's amazing that all of these people, because they're in New York, they're driving through New York. Yeah, they were
in New York.
That all these people are completely oblivious, and I wish they could stay that way. I wish I didn't know about the end of the world. And he's like, oh shit. Because she's clearly kind of traumatized by the knowledge that she knows, and he didn't really know what's going on, right? And now he kind of knows, and still doesn't really want to know. So they end up going to this office, and David Randall's still professional enough to say when he's going to be taken into this office that he's like, no, hold on. Before I let this box be opened, I have to make sure that this is the guy that I have to give it to, and he pulls out like photos of this doctor.
He's got 3 photos from the
like of different angles of this guy, and he's like holding it up to him. Yeah, I guess you are the guy. David Randall was a real professional courier. So they have this data that that was inside this box, and they end up putting it into a big mechanical computer that was out at UCLA that is actually in a few George Pal movies. They feature it in I know they feature it in War of the Worlds at the very least, and I'm pretty sure it's in
there was in another movie,
Destination Moon. It was in Destination Moon for them running the numbers for the moon launch. I can almost guarantee it. I can say with 90% certainty, let's say, because I know it's used. George Pal tends to like using the same, not the same.
It's a differential.
It's a differential computer. Yeah, it's a big mechanical computer. It gets fed in to it, and they basically say, yes, what's going to happen is Bellis is going to bump into Earth and wreck Earth. But before Bellis does that, it's Zyra is going to make a close pass to Earth. And it's all but going to wreck the Earth in the process. There might still be people that live through it. They say there's going to be tidal waves, earthquakes, because Zyra is going to pass so close, all this stuff is going to happen. But it doesn't really matter because like 11 days later, I think it is.
No, it's more than that.
I don't remember. It's a very short period of time. It's a very short period of time that Bellis is going to end up impacting the Earth. And all life on Earth will die because Earth is going to get torn apart. And they don't end up talking about the Roche limit. They don't end up talking about like tidal forces and how the Earth is. I know that as a astrophysics person. The point is that the movie doesn't talk about it, but what the movie is trying to describe makes sense from an astrophysics point of view. They're just not trying to bog you down in it. And I paused the film at this point and I said, Darlene, you understand what they're saying? Like, there is no hope here. Like, the world is going to die. And it's going to die.
The first thing that I kind of laughed to you about was the UN.
That's in the next scene. Well, it's in one of the next scenes. But you laughed about what? About the UN?
Well, you wouldn't have got because how scrambled people are.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have got even into doing a speech at the UN that quickly.
See, the thing is, remember that it was the U.S. that actually brought in Dr. Hendren, and I think it was the U.S. because of their position on the Security Council saying, hey, look, this guy needs to be listened to. And it was like the Brit, everybody else, except it was the chairman of the committee that they were having this hearing at was from India. And he was actually really respectful. It was the French, the British.
And that scientist.
Yeah, that was a Brit. I'm pretty sure he was supposed to be one of the British delegation. They were all being pricks. What's interesting is they never showed the Soviet Union in there, or China, or any of the other, like I think they had like Pakistan there. No, they didn't. I apologize. No, they did not. It was India. The ones that I specifically remember were United States, India, Britain, France. And the French and the British were just being bastards. And they were laughing it all off. And along with this astronomer that they had brought in that says, oh no, all their data is wrong. I'm sorry, we're confident
and then has to eat his shoes afterwards.
Yeah. So what we find out, we have David Randall learning the truth that the world is going to end. And this is where we see the change in his character, in my opinion, and why we saw him in the aircraft with this beautiful blonde originally. To me, it showed that his character was kind of this vivacious, kind of ladies' man who was all about living in the moment, where then all of a sudden the world is going to end. And yeah, most people at that point would change into being someone that lives in the moment, but he's completely different. He starts thinking about the fact that everything that he cared about is meaningless.
He starts burning money.
That's the point.
Because he's like, that's worthless.
Yeah, he goes to this fancy restaurant with Joyce and her fiance, and he has like $20 bills. Remember, $20 bills at that time are like $200 worth $200
Is that
today.
Dr. Fry?
Yeah.
George Fry.
They're technically not fiancés. They're not, because he has not asked her to marry him yet. But anyway, he's there, and there's this old prim lady who obviously doesn't know what's going on, and
he keeps using
David Randall just keeps leaning over and using the sterno can. Well, the sterno can that's underneath this like silver
fondue.
Whatever, and lighting $20 bills on fire to light his cigarette because he's like, I've always wanted to do that. And I guess it's okay because money's worthless now. Big deal. And he's changing in a way like where most people would completely
he's also
crack.
Getting drunk because he's talking about the bottle he's got. They pay
by the inch. You pay by the
inch. And here, how much have I spent so far?
Yeah, this bottle's worth $17 or whatever, $17.50. That's what Joyce ends up saying. He goes, no problem, I have money to burn. And he smiles and leans over and lights another $20 bill.
And lights her cigarette.
With it. And I'm like, okay, in most other movies, this would be a ridiculous scene. The fact is that it's hilarious to watch, because you realize that this guy is actually kind of broken from this information. And Joyce and her sort of fiance have known about this for a long time.
Was it before or after this? No, his fiance, he didn't know until it was said in that office.
But she knew. That's the thing. She had been living with this information for a while. And it's the point of he's coming to terms with the world ending. And start seeing what really matters rather than what he thought mattered. And I think
because money was all that mattered.
So like I said,
at that time.
Yeah, exactly. It was things that were like material. This beautiful blonde that's sitting on his lap in this aircraft, his own airplane, right? It's all this money that he gets paid for doing this proper job of
going around the world.
He's used to the finer things. And now he's like, none of that matters. I actually care about things that do matter now. I have to. Like, he has to fill his life with things that actually matter. And he does. So the next scene, I think it's a really nice touch that he ends up calling Joyce Stargazer all the time. Like, that's his nickname for her, is Stargazer. I don't know what you're thinking, and it actually puts in this chemistry between them.
And is it before this, the dance scene, or after the dance scene, that the doctor, a medical doctor, actually asked her to marry?
That's after this, Darlene. You keep jumping ahead like 2 or 3 scenes.
I didn't
see after this scene where he's lighting money on fire for cigarettes is that scene at the UN where they say basically 8 months until the world ends, and that Dr. Hendren proposes that rockets be built by every major nation on Earth to save humanity and any life that we can. Okay, and this is where he's laughed out of the UN, right? And it's kind of shocking, like I said, how flippant everyone is about this. It's not like even the other astronomer that like says, oh, they're wrong, isn't even saying that Bellis and Zyra aren't going to make a close pass. Like, oh yeah, they will make a close pass, and it's going to screw everything up. But it's to the point where they don't even, like, the major nations seemingly don't even care that there will be earthquakes or tidal waves. It's pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking.
Is it because they don't, at this point I was going, is it that somebody in their government didn't want them to?
I think that has to be it.
To actually state, make it so it's a laugh, so the panic doesn't
I think it was. I think it had to have been the major governments doing that, of not trying to have people panic. Because the movie, by the way, folks, this movie is based on a book that, of When Worlds Collide. And in the book, they do talk about how there are multiple rockets that are built, but I have not read it, so I can't tell you the details of it. I just know that there were multiple rockets built in the book that make it off Earth. Not many at all.
And we've already had this thought process behind us. Is me and you have had this discussion about how many people would we have to have so we could reprocreate to being
viable.
A viable society. And you said what, at the minimum 10,000?
No, it's not 10,000. You could do it with a couple hundred. You get some scary things at a couple hundred. Like, you have to be very careful, but it's a couple hundred. And we'll get to that. Okay? Because remember, 1951, they didn't know about all the nitty-gritty details of genetics and all that. Okay? They knew about DNA. I'm pretty sure in 1951 they knew about DNA. I'm pretty sure. I'm sure somebody out there screaming at their computer going, Aaron, you're wrong. But I'll be honest, biology is not my
yours is
expertise. It's astronomy, astrophysics, climate. Anyway, we end up having Dr. Hendren going to Washington, D.C., and he meets with some industrialists. And here's where I thought this was really interesting. I think it's two industrialists end up saying, you know what? It's no skin off my back. I'll give you funding for your rocket. And they don't ask for anything in return. They said, basically, the logic was, if it's all a big panic and the world continues on, it's money invested in technology and the space program. And if the world does end, guess what? People might live. And they don't ask for seats on the rocket at all.
But one guy does.
One guy does, but he comes in later. Okay?
And he wants...
he wants a seat. He actually wants control. We'll get to that. That's actually almost the next scene. But this is where Tony comes in to ask for Joyce's hand in marriage. And she admits to her father that she actually has feelings for David now because of all the time that they've been spending together, like going around the U.S. and trying to raise money for this rocket program to put humanity on it. Anyway, this is where we're introduced to Stanton, who's an industrialist in a wheelchair, and
DNA 1953.
Okay, so not quite, folks, not quite. I knew it was in the time.
It started in 1869, but
the discovery of DNA.
The DNA sketching of how it is 1953.
So we have to give the movie a little bit of a pass.
There is a 1929 with some information on the sugars.
We're saying we have to give the movie a little bit of a pass.
Yeah.
Okay, so this industrialist comes in and says, I will fund the rest of the rocket. Money is no object, but I want a seat on the rocket, and I want to choose who goes on the rocket. And Dr. Hendren absolutely refuses. He goes, no. And Stanton goes, okay, you're hard. You're negotiating hard here. I get it. Fine. I want a seat on the rocket, and I want 50% of the seats. And Dr. Hendren goes, screw off. Basically, he says, screw off. And Stanton's like, you're insane. You mean you don't want my money? And he goes, no, I want your money, but I'm thinking about humanity where you're thinking about yourself. I will promise you a seat on the rocket and no one else.
And he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah. He's an older man in a wheelchair. And that's what Dr. Hendren says. Guess what? Your money for your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because this guy's obviously a douchebag. But he has the money.
And he goes to walk out the door because the guy wasn't going to do it.
Yeah, and but Stanton, this industrialist, is like, damn you, fine. I get the seat. And Dr. Hendren's like, welcome aboard. Like, hell yeah. It was actually a pretty intense scene where you don't really know what's going on because it isn't really going with what your expectations of how that should all play out. I thought it was a well done scene is what I'm saying. So what we have is Joyce and David going around the United States, okay, and they are starting to recruit workers for this project. And they basically say, hey, look, we cannot promise you seats. There's only going to be 40 seats on this rocket. That's all we can put for the mass because it takes so much mass to escape Earth's gravity.
Let's get this straight. There's going to be sheep and
Yes.
cows, and they show them.
Yeah.
And they're all young.
Yes, all young animals because you want the hardiest animals. I get, and I try to explain that to you, and you're like, okay, I get it. But you want young people.
But I ask you why they didn't have children.
Because children are going to be a burden on the immediate survival of
the colony.
But you need children in the short term, just not in the immediate term.
And this is one of those things that makes us grade movies. If they make us think, ask questions,
yes,
and further our thought, we usually give a thumbs up on something like that, even if it's a modern one that makes us discuss things out.
Yeah, and obviously this movie has nearly every major scene in it has a moment like that where you're like, ooh, that's something to think about, or that's an interesting idea. And like I said, there's moments in this movie that give me emotions, like deep emotions. And it's one of these scenes is where they're like, okay, we cannot promise you a seat on this rocket, but what we can promise you is that the work you do will contribute to the survival of something, of humanity, something. And you might get a seat. Who knows? There's going to be a lottery, right?
Yes, they've already promoted it as a lottery.
And people are just...
And there's two different sets of
there's
groups.
There's going to be men and
there's
women.
A box for the women and there's a box for the men.
But that's later on. That's later on.
But you see it kind of as they're taking when they come in with a group of people off the plane that he's
it's
piloting,
all men or it's all women.
And she's taking the women.
Yes.
And he's taking the men. And at that scene, there is actually a couple.
Yes, and we see them later on, and I forget their names because they're not that important. I think I have it written down somewhere here. I'm sorry, I don't have it. Now.
It comes into how humanity works.
Yes, so people are basically dropping their normal jobs because at this point, everyone is still laughing about Earth being destroyed, but the people that they're recruiting are basically saying, we're going to drop our jobs, we're going to drop our lives and move out to this mountain that might be in the Appalachians. We're not really sure.
It's in the Rockies. I think it's in the Rockies.
It's in the Appalachians because later on we see a helicopter that they're riding a helicopter from the rocket site to New York City.
Right.
So it might be in the Adirondacks, it might be in the Appalachians. It's somewhere close-ish to New York City.
I could see it in the Adirondacks. Okay. I've been there before.
So we end up getting like these this montage of basically all these workers doing things that need to be done to preserve humanity. Like there's this one shot that I said, Darlene, that actually chokes me up a little bit. And it's all the women in these coveralls scanning books into microfiche to preserve humanity's knowledge. And they're just constant. It's this huge room of all these microfiche machines and all these women constantly scanning page after page after page. And they're like, we have to preserve everything. And later on, we see them loading up the boxes of microfiche, and it's box after box after box. And it's like, these people actually care. They actually care that it doesn't matter what the book is. They're scanning it in. It's the Holy Bible.
One of them
was
the Holy Bible. One was Gray's Anatomy.
Yeah.
It doesn't say Gray's Anatomy, but it says the human anatomy.
Yeah.
Then the next one is...
It's a whole bunch. There's like philosophy. There's even like... they say it doesn't matter if it's philosophy or a book we disagree with. It has to be kept. It has to be. So they scanned everything.
I don't know if they could have had time, because today we couldn't even get it everything on one computer.
But that's different today. I mean,
they had to do reference information and stuff like that.
I'm sure that like certain novels and things just were never scanned. You know, like the old dime novels, I'm sure never got scanned. But also remember that the knowledge base of 1951 is like a tenth of what we have today in 2021.
And they didn't talk about anything about like movies or something like that.
But I assume they had to have put movies on board. They had to have, maybe not many. But again, remember, the amount of movies that were in existence in 1951 would be a lot different than it would be today. Now, mind you, movies then would have taken up more room because you'd need to have these big reels. So I can see them not saving tons of movies, maybe just important ones. But still, the fact is that you have these scenes of people doing everything they can, like gathering animals, testing the animals.
Farmers, they had farmers and that on the list.
I think they're harvesting eggs. I think they might even say that to freeze them. But I don't think that's outright said. It looks like that's something what they're trying to do, but that might be me putting something into the movie. I think you're
putting that in.
We get to the point where all the astronomers now agree that the worlds are going to collide and that the Earth is doomed.
And it's probably 6 months.
It's something. It doesn't matter.
Because I really like the scene where you have the guy, the newsboy.
Yeah.
He's talking about here's this right after the UN.
Yeah, that everybody's laughing. Yeah.
And every other newspaper it's like 50-50 on whether they're calling it a hoax or it's going to happen.
Yeah, but we get to the point where the astronomers now agree that the planets are going to collide, that the Earth is doomed. And this is where Stanton now says, look, we're the furthest ahead on all these rockets, and there are other rockets being built. He does say that. But we're the furthest along, and we have the best chance of success. And when the world goes to pot, everyone is going to try, every mother with a child is going to try to get on this rocket.
And he's got guns.
And I have guns. And you know what? At this point, you have to look. I looked at you and I said, Darlene, that's a fair point, right? Like, in the end, humans are smart. Humans as a group are dumb. And you get into a situation like that, I'm going to try to get you onto a rocket. I'm going to try to get somebody that I love onto that rocket. Am I going to sacrifice humanity's entire hope by storming the rocket? No. That's a line I freaking draw. But remember, mob mentality is different than personal morals. And he brings in a huge amount of guns, and this is where they start evacuating. Martial law is declared.
Yes.
There's military people everywhere, and they start evacuating the coastal towns because you have Zyra about to make its close pass. And they know there's going to be tidal waves. They know there's going to be earthquakes. All right, so we kind of have this scene where David is being told that he needs to go on the rocket. He's not going to even have a choice in the matter. He's not going to be a part of the lottery. He needs to go because his skill set is needed for flying, number one. And number two, that he's actually a really morally important person to this team. He's the one that helped recruit everybody. He seems to be a leader. He's leading this team.
But the most of the word on that is that she wants.
Yes. Now he thinks he should not go. David says, I don't need to go. There's people way more qualified to survive than me. And we actually end up having this, it breaks off from there. He's really adamant about not going. We see the streets of New York City empty because it's been evacuated. 1 p.m. on this date when Zyra is supposed to make its close pass hits, and nothing happens. And Stanton's there in like the rocket bunker going, I knew it. This is all a scam to get money out of me, blah, 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 blah. And then the whole world shakes. But this is actually a really good set because they must have had the entire set on rockers. And it's a big set. And because everybody is moving perfectly, it looks like the whole room is just rocking back and forth, and things are being thrown. And we have this montage of volcanoes exploding, bridges toppling, glaciers crumbling, tidal waves, and the world is ending. I wrote down like 2 notes. The model work here is amazing. Amazing, the model work here. And it actually, they built the stakes up very well here. And
the New York,
it
was already had water in it, and then you have a tidal wave come in.
There's a model, a model where tidal wave comes into New York City. Like,
and there's already water on it.
Like, yeah, a small amount.
It's like a floor of it.
Like it dropped or something like that. Like the whole city dropped a little bit in the initial earthquake. We end up later on when they're flying their helicopter, we actually see like a long shot of New York City with towers leaning to the side, and there's like
water.
Hundreds of feet of water. Like, there's like ships toppled inside New York City.
And they're going to drop off supplies to a mountaintop.
Yeah, it's one of the few, like there's they detect a radio signal from this community.
That's 100 miles away.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find what it's called. I don't have it written down. I'm sorry. But it's a tiny little lump of land, and it's clearly what used to be a mountaintop. And there's 44 people. This radio call for help. It says, "Oh, there's 44 of us. Please help us. Is there anyone left? Is there any survivors?
We need water.
We need food and water, and please somebody help us." Like, it's clear that out of the entire East Coast, these 44 people, and the people that were at this rocket facility might be the only ones left.
Well, you have a Red Cross, tent and a nurse that's there.
Yeah.
And so this was one of those
evacuation sites, but there's only 44 people left there. They drop food and water, and they end up finding like a house that's floating with a child on the roof. And they save this kid, and they end up giving him like a seat on the rocket because he's so small.
But at that time is when the doctor, the fiance.
Yeah, Dr. Fry.
Fry.
Is it Dr.? No, it's not Dr. Fry. It's not Dr. Fry.
I don't know
Fry. Dr. Fry is a different guy. It's oh God, is it Drake?
I don't know who it is.
I'm sorry. Like, yeah, there are characters that I don't remember the names of, but it's the fiance. He has this whole thing where he claims to David that the pilot, who is George Fry, who is this engineer, has a heart condition. He says he has a heart condition and he's most likely not going to survive the launch. But he needs to go because he is the most qualified to fly this rocket. But if he dies, there's no one else that will fly it.
But at this time of the boy, he actually runs off with the helicopter after the boy is thrown into the seat.
Yeah. And he thinks the fiance, the sort of fiance, is going to leave him behind because they've been fighting about Joyce. And he doesn't. Like, he comes back and picks him up. He goes, "I thought you were going to leave me behind." And he's like, I can't lie that it didn't cross my mind. But he came back. Like, he is a dick, but no, he's not. He's not really. And then he starts talking to David about Dr. Fry, and David has up until this point is like, "I'm not going. There are people better qualified that should live besides me." And this guy finally convinces him that David needs to go as like the second pilot, as the backup pilot. And David's like, "My God, he wants to believe it." He's like, this is the whole thing I've been looking for months to convince me that I actually have to go. Because he wants to live. It's not like he wants to die. He wants to live, but he can't morally justify his own life. Now it's like this doctor basically kind of hands him his own life. And he's filled with joy about it. And he runs out and kisses Joyce, and you realize this doctor is like, wow, yeah, that's his sort of fiance, but he realized a long time ago that Joyce was actually in love with David. And he wasn't going to have David leave. See, I get a little choked up about this. I'm actually getting a little choked up. That
if you love somebody, you'd have to let them go if they're loving somebody else. It's not you can't force that.
I know, but I'm saying that this guy's like, I love Joyce, yes, but Joyce deserves to be happy, and Joyce is in love with David. So I'm going to do everything I can to bring them together. Even if it hurts me, yeah, I'm going, because I'm like this uber medical doctor.
He's a
and
medical
he's
doctor.
actually qualified to go. It's not like he's a douchebag and has weaseled his way onto the crew. He is an actual qualified medical doctor.
Because you see him testing everybody for, all the physical.
Yeah, yeah.
Because some of the people got removed from it because of the physical.
So what we have, it's this. He watches David and Joyce like embrace. It just filled with happiness that they're going to actually be able to live together as long as this rocket doesn't fail. I'm getting choked up again. My God, it's actually a meaningful scene. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Wow. So we have the numbers drawn, the random lottery that's going to be drawn. There's this couple that we kind of met right at the beginning that came in together as volunteers. One of them got the number, luckily enough, and the other one didn't. And so the guy comes in and basically goes up to Dr. Hendren and says, "Here's my coin. Give it to somebody else. I'm not leaving her behind." And this is where Stanton's body man pulls a gun and says, "That coin's mine. I'm going on the trip." And Stanton, again, like a hardcore, not Stanton, Hendren, Dr. Hendren's like, "You're not going. That coin's been assigned." And he's having a gun held to him. But freaking Hendren is a hardcore, like, there's no negotiating with this guy. Hendren is amazing in this. He doesn't blink. He's like, "You're not going. I have the gun. I will." And then that's where Stanton pulls his own gun out of the freaking wheelchair and plugs his own body man. And he goes, "Hendren, I told you, goddammit, there's going to be people that will do anything to get onto this rocket, and we need to arm everyone." And Hendren's like, "Okay, I know what you're saying, but if we arm everybody, everyone's going to riot and storm the rocket. So we need to try to keep the guns kind of under wraps." So what we end up having is everyone starts loading up into the rocket because
there's some problems with the rocket because
there's problems with the rocket because of the earthquakes. What happens is that during the earthquakes on the close pass, it started rolling down the ramp, and they had to block it. The thing is, as Bellis is getting closer and closer now, especially in this last scene, the world is ending, and it's not like ooh, look, everyone's just going to go to sleep ending. The sky is on fire. The world is being torn apart.
And you can actually even see that Bellis is cracking too.
Bellis is cracking a little bit, but it's so much bigger than Earth that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's actually so large that it's drawing the atmosphere off Earth at this point. We actually see it after they've launched. We actually see streamers coming off Earth before it just blows itself apart. For 1951, that was a good special effect. It wouldn't hold up today, but for 1951, that was amazing. Regardless, everyone starts loading up. Okay, and what we have is Dr. Hendren and Stanton outside, and Hendren is wheeling Stanton around.
He said to the person, "I will wheel him up."
I'll wheel him up. And Stanton ends up, Hendren ends up staying out there, and we see the workers that are finally rioting and wanting to storm the rocket to live.
Because they grabbed the guns that...
Yep. And Hendren's he basically hits the launch button on the side of the rocket and steps back, and Stanton's screaming, "No, you have to let me on the rocket. I have to live." And he actually gets up out of his wheelchair like a miracle kind of thing. He actually was crippled, but he's wanting to live so much that he forces himself out of that wheelchair to stumble towards the rocket as it starts going down the slope.
Clips that magnetic
they all
clips.
blow out. They blow out. Anyway, Dr. Hendren looks to Stanton and says, that rocket's not for us. The New World's for the young. God, I'm getting choked up again. That's not for us. We have to let the young live in the New World. It's going to be tough. And they watch that rocket, and you have to think they're dead as soon as that rocket, because when those engines kick on as it's going down the slope, they're vaporized, along with everybody else that was riding and shooting the guns. They're vaporized. So this rocket goes down the slope, kicks on its engines, and then shoots off this huge ramp going up into the atmosphere at huge velocities.
Everybody passes out.
There's
only one seat that is. This is one of the things you didn't realize.
Yeah.
He'd already decided
that he was going to stay behind.
That he was going to not have Stanton on. Because there's only one empty seat.
Well, remember they said we're 180 pounds over mass anyway. And so he was calculating, I have to stay behind anyway. Dr. Hendren, I have to stay behind. And then, no, we're going to have Stanton stay behind too, because in the end, he's just going to be a drain on everybody. And it's a hard decision to make, but I have to make it, and I'm going to sacrifice my own life to do it. And it's this whole like father giving his daughter the chance to live. It's also sad at this point because everyone is passed out from the G-forces that no one witnesses the last moments of Earth. That Earth dies and there's nothing left. Like, it's gone. There's nothing. No, there's no, guys, there's no like miracle that comes out of nowhere. Earth is dead. Everything is dead. The only thing that is left of humanity and Earth is inside this rocket. And it's streaking towards Zyra. They have to turn and burn. They use all of their fuel turning and burning to slow down before it hits the atmosphere. They glide in. It turns out that Dr. Fry didn't have a stroke. And he's really happy. And you know, David Randall wakes up and he's ecstatic that his pilot is not dead. Like, he would take over. And I think he does take over a little bit to help fly the rocket. You know, burning the thrusters to get the proper attitude coming in. And they run out, and it's kind of a cool shot. They're looking down. There's these peaks, these mountain peaks that are coming up out of clouds. And he's like, I can't tell where we're going to land, but we have to go between those peaks. And they do. They go through the clouds, and they finally come out, and it's kind of over this large snow plain. And he's like, okay, I can put us down here. And he freaking does. And they're rattling around in this rocket as it touches down. And it because of the way it was built, it actually had skids on it. So it could do this. And it's skipping belly on the ground. And it finally grinds to a stop, out of fuel. Everyone's alive. They're a little shaken up. And one of the guys like, well, we got to go out.
We got to check the...
No, hold on. We got to check the air. We got to make sure it's breathable. And he goes, good air or bad, there's only one place we can go. And they just pop the hatch and go outside. And it turns out, yeah, they landed on this snow plain, but down below is this kind of verdant valley.
And it's a bad map painting.
It's a very bad map painting. But it was supposed to be a placeholder, and George Pal thought it was a placeholder because George Pal normally wouldn't let that crap go. But it's the end, folks. Like, there's hope for humanity. There is hope for humanity.
But there's only 40.
There's only 40 people and all this stuff. Now, we've talked a lot about the plot. Obviously, I love this movie. This movie and like War of the Worlds are the two movies that I think actually really emotionally impact me for whatever reason from this era. Since this was your first time really watching it that you can remember, what things stood out to you as things that worked?
Why do you always ask me that question? Can you just answer your own question?
I can, well, yeah, because I want to get your opinion too. That's why I ask it.
I like the rocket is really an interesting thing, and I'm like, it kind of looks like the
V2.
The V2 on they had that one that was.
Oh, you're talking about the buzz bomb with the V1 where they had like the launch rails and things.
So it uses that thought process. I thought that was pretty good. The thing that everybody had to pull together after the earthquake.
Yeah.
to put I-beams in to structurally make the ramp sound.
Yeah.
Underneath the rocket, that was kind of really good. The long distance point of where you see everybody just doing their own things, when you come into it as they're starting to make the rocket and all that
montage of them trying to save humanity, like this is the jobs that save humanity. But I think you're being hyper specific. Like, I think the plot overall it worked. It's a man against nature.
Yes, but I can see government shutting that down and allowing humanity just to die.
Yeah, but
I don't see them getting to the new UN with that information.
Sure, I can see, but I also can see industrialists just funding something of their own accord, and at least the U.S. government going, hey, you know what? It's private business. Let them do it. Like, and that's the only reason anyone from the United States lives, is because private business actually takes care of it. And it's only because of like private, well, I would say public scientists doing the work ahead of time, and then everyone just volunteering. Because let's be honest, this isn't a pro-capitalist movie by any means. If anything, it's actually pro-socialist, because it's everyone pooling together.
Not communism.
Not communist. It's everyone pooling together for the greater good, and ignoring the fact that things cost money because it just needs to work. And they do it. There is money. There's jobs being made. Money is moving hands, but it's like, no, look, we're not going to care about a return on investment of the next quarter. Our investment is the future. Screw you. You know, I don't care about shareholders. I care about humanity. The characters. I mean, yeah, I can gripe the fact that I don't remember the sort of fiance's name, but David Randall as the courier, there is a character there, a solid character. I would say Joyce Hendren isn't as strong of a character as David Randall, but that's a character still. She is an interesting person. She has it's not just about the love interest, the reason why she's there. She's there to help her father. She's honestly, actively wanting to help humanity. She's wanting to do X, Y, Z, right? Stanton, even though he's the jerk capitalist industrialist that's funding the rest of the rocket, he's actually an interesting character, because all the points that he makes in the movie are true. They're right, and they come to pass, because he is such a jerk that he knows how the rest of humanity is going to be a jerk. So everything he says is pretty prophetic.
Yes, but he actually instigates his own problem.
Yes,
problem.
He does. Yes, he does. You have Dr. Hendren, the lead scientist, who's, you know, Joyce's father, who is not just your generic scientist from one of these movies. He's actually a badass, standing up to people that have a gun to him by just saying, no, you're not going. I'm sorry. You're going to kill me? Big deal. That means I die now instead of tomorrow. Screw you.
Because, well, he doesn't say
no,
that.
But that's the point.
But like that's what his thought was.
Well, I have to assume that's what his point was. He's like, I'm thinking about humanity, I'm not thinking about myself. And that's what a lot of the characters are doing here, is they're thinking about humanity and not themselves. All of the special effects, barring that last matte painting, not only work, but I would say are arguably some of the best that we see in the 1950s, and this is still 1951. You're nodding. You have to say yes, no, you agree. Except for that last one. I
think they're really good, but I don't know if I can actually say it's the best I've seen.
That New York having the tidal wave come through it.
That's
a model work. I'm saying just overall the special effects in this are amazing. There's a couple that don't work, like that last matte painting. That was kind of bad. And there's a couple composited shots with the rocket that are a little janky.
Yes, because you can almost see that they're trying to flip the...
Yes, but even when it's a little janky.
I will give one point that I do think is great. There was details in small things.
Yes.
Like there's the details that every box was being weighed.
Yes, they're weighing everything and writing it down. Or the signs that are everywhere. You can waste anything you want except time. Time is the only important resource. Like, don't worry about wasting, tinfoil or whatever if you're having to do something. You know what I mean? It's time is the only thing we can't waste. These signs that are everywhere.
And everywhere is these 2 dates.
The 2 dates of when
the countdowns.
Yeah, when the close pass occurs and when effectively the world society is going to end at that close pass, and then the world is going to end when Earth slams into Bellis. What doesn't work in this movie? Is there anything that really doesn't work?
Timing doesn't really work. I think it works, but I sometimes feel like
you got lost about how long time has been passed. That's what the calendars are there for.
They're there, but all of a sudden it just doesn't.
I know, but they're also trying to tell a story that happens over 8 months. So there's going to be time jumps. I see what you're saying, though. It might be a little confusing to people about like how much time is passing in certain scenes. I get that. And even with the janky, a couple of the janky special effects, they're still much better than most of the things that we see in 1950s and 60s science fiction movies. So I can't say that they don't work. Is there anything, honestly, else that doesn't work? This is one of the greats to me. This is one of the greats. Along with War of the Worlds and Time Machine, where you just go, hey, look, if you want to know what 1950s and 60s science fiction is about, this is one of them. And I'm honestly shocked that you've never seen this with me before.
I don't remember seeing it. But then again, you bought that and never opened it.
Yeah, I did. It was open.
You did?
Yeah, I've watched it at least 3 or 4 times because it's one of those movies that I like going back to.
I don't watch as much TV as you do.
Yeah, I know, but I watch old movies, yeah. So what can modern filmmakers learn from George Pal? George Pal and the entire production team that went through this.
Sometimes the small details are your savior in a lot of things of telling the story.
Yes. Have people reacting realistically, both good and bad. I really like the fact that this is one of the worst situations you can possibly think of for the world. The world is going to end. That's it. But people are both reacting. You don't need to show people panicking, right? That's needless spectacle. We know that's going to happen.
Well, they kind of did that when you see martial law being...
Yeah, but you don't show people rioting in the streets.
No, but you know that it already happened.
That's the point. You don't need to show it because you know it would have happened.
And you get the sense that this was a closed... Where they're doing this rocket is a closed community. The only way you can get in is through passes. So this is why it was Stanton's bringing in the cases of guns that caused a problem of the rioting.
So you say that, but I don't know. I want to say there had to have been military there to protect it. We just don't see it.
They would have been on the outskirts.
Yeah, but at the end when like the air is being torn off Earth, you would have thought that even the military would have probably come in and like gotten close to see the rocket.
But you see what I'm saying about they wouldn't have had the guns, and one of them is a bar.
Yeah, I thought I saw a Browning automatic rifle.
You wouldn't have had that if he didn't bring it in.
So
because that inner community was those people that had the lottery were the inner, not just guards. They were.
I don't think any guards ended up going.
No.
Or at least we don't know. We don't know that. It's possible because they said it was like there's 600-ish men and women working on the project. So like 1,200, and there was 40 tickets, effectively, these random coins that they ended up. What was really cool is I thought they actually even did their lottery well. Like they drew the numbers before the numbers even were given out. And people had to randomly draw numbers out of the box. The numbers had already been drawn. It doesn't matter. So this is what's fair. You chose your number. It's on you, not on, you can't blame us for randomly, quote unquote, choosing something. Like, that's a really smart way of doing it. The movie's thoughtful. It's thoughtful. And yeah, I mean,
but they were also picking their people too.
Yeah, out of the volunteers, like, yeah, if you're a jerk, you're not going to be working for us anyway, because you're most likely not.
And I thought it was 600 together.
No, because David says the odds are like 1 in 600 or something like that, which might suggest that there's like 20, because there would be 20 men, so like 20 times 60, which would be a huge amount. 20 times 600, so you're talking about, it's insane. That would be 12,000 people, 12,000 men working on the project.
Oh, that wouldn't be.
It doesn't make sense. So it's him basically saying there should be like. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Like you said, the numbers didn't work.
It doesn't really work. Ignore the numbers, but. And
I think we would have known, way beforehand, of this.
No.
You don't think
not
so?
Not in the 1950s. Today would be a different story. We would have probably detected it way before then, but it's not like we would have been able to change it because of the size of Bellis and Zyra. Like, we could have detected, like, let's say, hey, we get a 10-year notice rather than an 8-month notice on this today. There's still nothing we can do, because something that large, we're never going to be able to shift the orbit of. That's it. It's done.
I don't know. I don't know how they figured out that Zyra would get into orbit.
They figured that's just simple astrophysics. To me, like, if you understand its path that it's taking, you understand how close it's going to get to Earth, you understand the path it's going to take because of gravity. After that, how it's going to be deflected. It's math. It's a lot of math, but you can do it. I don't have a problem with that at all.
In Pale's thing, it was supposed to be basically an ice world, and because it gets close to the sun, it becomes.
See, to me, it was a rogue planet. It's a rogue planet because Bellis is huge, right? And then Zyra is an Earth-sized moon of it. And it was a rogue planet, and you can say Zyra was warm even in interstellar space because of the gravitational influence of Bellis pulling on it, like, Jupiter on Io. And that's why it was able to stay warm, and there is life there. In fact, if you look at that last map painting, there was a civilization there at one point.
Well, that was what I was going to say, is
we
that
can't take that.
I don't think that map painting was supposed to. I don't think it was.
It was a placeholder. It's a placeholder. Pal wouldn't approve of that.
I think he was actually thinking of it as, once it got into orbit, then it could start.
No, I think he assumed that it would have life, just not a civilization. Because the book that it's based on has life there. So, we're just continuing to talk about this movie. And folks, if you haven't seen it, watch it. Because we're going to babble on and on and on. Because honestly, this movie did make us think. It made us talk. It obviously raises passions in me. Like, I get emotional talking about certain scenes. I know you got a little emotional watching it.
And I don't usually get emotional.
I saw it in your eyes. I'm not trying to, like, make fun of. I'm not making fun of you. I just
said I don't normally get emotional.
But you did in this, right?
I like that love scene thing that he actually. I still think that he was going to, and said, I can't do that to him.
Yeah.
And then he decided that the more he saw his love interest, the doctor did, being, that he was like, I want her to be happy.
Yeah.
And how can I get her to be happy?
Yeah.
It was truly unselfish.
Yeah. Selfless.
Selfless.
Amazing movie, folks. We both recommend it highly. I don't know if we can recommend it more highly than we do. It really is good. Drop what you're doing and watch it.
I don't think it's that much, but go ahead and watch it.
For a 1950s or 60s science fiction movie, this is 10 out of 10. For a science fiction movie, this is 9 out of 10. This is better than modern science fiction movies in many ways.
Well, modern science fiction sometimes is crap.
But I mean, old science fiction is sometimes crap too. I'm just saying, overall, in the annals of science fiction film, folks, this is one of the greats. This is one of the best.
Well, we will let you go and have a good night.
Yeah, have a good night, folks. Thanks for listening.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.